Hey, welcome, this is Jelle from Growing Bonsai. People often ask me, why do you take so many cuttings and all those seedlings? Those plants will never become a bonsai. What are you wasting your time on? Everybody knows, to get a good bonsai, you need to get a very good tree with a big trunk, like this yew. Is that true though? And could this also become 3 nice bonsai in my lifetime? And to make it more complex, many people don't actually have a yard to grow trees out. And using big pots to grow something with long whips, it doesn't look all that nice. So can you actually grow a whip like this out in a bonsai pot? Can you grow a bonsai from a cutting in a pot in a reasonable amount of time? That's what this video is about, and that is what I've done with this tree. 4 or 5 years ago, this was a cutting just like the ones that I showed you. I have just potted up in a pot 1 size bigger. In this video I'll show you what I did, I'll show you what the roots look like, and I'll show you 4 reasons why it is actually a good idea to grow a cutting out in a bonsai pot as a bonsai. Growing out a bonsai in a pot. So no, we're not going to plant it in a big container, we're not going to plant it out in the ground. We're growing this one out in a bonsai pot. Why do I do this and why? You might get better results doing it this way than planting it in the full ground. What you can tell, this is a small tree. So this corkbark elm has been in this pot for 2 years. Before that I was in a slightly bigger pot. And 2 years ago I decided, no, I'm going to grow this out the slow way. The slow way meaning I'm going to keep control of the roots because they can't run very long. So you don't have the problem that in your nebari one of the roots is overly thick. This is one of the reasons why growing it out in a pot might get better results. I am using sacrifice branches on this trunk to thicken up the lower part. This one and that one have been here for 2 years. The one in the back is 1 year old. These two, the lowest ones, are actually starting to interfere with each other. To avoid bulges, I'm going to take this one off. After taking that one off, I'm going to take this one out of the pot and I'm going to show you the roots. I'm going to show you how you develop a very nice nebari by growing it in a pot. Another thing that you get is, in a pot like this, the plant doesn't grow all that fast. It means the thickening up goes a lot slower. Now what happens if you slowly thicken up? The bark cracks more gently, so you don't get very big, very deep fissures. These modest fissures make that the bonsai later on will scale much better. If you zoom in on this trunk, you will see the cracks in the bark are quite natural. Unfortunately, this slow thickening also means it takes a lot longer. As said, this has already been in a pot for 4 years and I got it as a cutting, maybe about this size. So that's not very fast. If I would have put it in the ground, it would have been this thick probably already. But then you're aiming for a very big bonsai. You also have very big cuts and very little taper. That is the third thing that you can control much better when it's in a pot. You can keep track of every single branch because they don't thicken that fast. And you can remove them before you get big scars. So I am going to remove this branch and I'm using knob cutters for this. And they leave a dent in your trunk, so they make a little bit of a deep cut. I am thinking a little bit on how I'm going to put this cut, because this branch, this is an elm, and elms root really well, and this variety is very desired. So I might actually just do a cut for the cutting and then clean up the wound. No day like today. And now for the depression, just a tiny little bit deeper, aiding the tree in growing over it. If you didn't know, you wouldn't see it. Now let's use a little bit of putty on there and let's have it heal over in summer. So the tree is now in a fairly deep blue pot. And I've selected a slightly wider, shallower greenish pot. It is not about the aesthetics why I'm selecting this pot, but I want the root flare to spread out wide. And I think that a wider, shallower pot will be better. Next to this, the volume of the pot is a little bit larger than this one, so this can grow a little bit faster than it is growing now. In the tree, if I turn it around, I still have this young sacrifice branch and this old sacrifice branch. The old one can stay for another season. At that point, this wound will have healed and I can remove this one slowly. This one will be as big as that one. And that one can grow then another season, and hopefully by then the trunk will have doubled in size. So in 2 years I want to double the size of this trunk without making any big cuts in the upper canopy. Because that is the aim, right? I want as few big cuts in the canopy. And if you look at the tree, there is not a single chop mark in there. Nice fat buds. They are almost open. Well, actually some of them are slightly open. Perfect time. Let's repot the tree. A nice aran pot. This is interesting, it's completely solidly grown into the pot. Needs some help there. One day I'm going to buy a repotting hook. So for pots that have a little lip and where trees have been in the pot and filled it with roots, you can remove the substrate from along the edge with a root hook or with a repotting knife. That way you create space between the wall of the pot and the root ball, and then you should be able to wiggle it out. Well, let's see whether this works now. Still the wire is stuck. That's a silly mistake. Okay, the wire wasn't stuck. Well, you look at that, all the roots, they have basically just overtaken the mesh, and the mesh was well attached to the pot and therefore I couldn't get it out. This tree has grown an enormous amount of roots. Time to get the root ball cleaned up. Connection wire, let's get that out. No, can't get it out right now. Also connected to the roots. So we'll just have to slowly go through it and open up the root ball. So last year the pot wasn't draining all that well, and well, I think it's clear why. The mesh is completely overgrown with roots. That means no water has been able to penetrate out of the pot. With the mesh removed, it's now time to clean out the substrate from between the roots. So there's a few things that you can notice as I'm repotting this. First of all, there's a lot of organic matter in here. That is not because of the organic matter that I use, but this is the fertilizer that decomposes and then adds organic matter to your pot. Next to this, there's roots like this one here, that comes up, and instead of going outward, it is going across the root ball. Now, I can of course edit this back into the root ball here, but I can also just remove it because it is not really needed here, right? There's lots and lots of roots. And that's the other thing that you can see. There is a lot of fine roots. There's nice thick roots. The nebari is quite wide and flat. And in fact the whole root ball is nice and flat. That's another benefit of growing in pots. You don't actually need to put anything underneath your roots. You can just, by pruning and every 2 years editing out the roots, create a very nice root spread. Look at how finely twigged that is. No big lumpy roots in there. All nice and smooth. Now I'm going to remove roots that grow up like this one or that one. I'm going to thin out places where the roots are getting quite thick. I'm going to make sure that all the roots that are in here radiate in an outward fashion and don't interact with too many others. And I'll do that throughout the root ball. And of course I'm going to thin out the thickness of the root ball by basically clipping away roots that are at the bottom of the root ball. I'm just going to clip off the roots that grow
down from the center of the root ball. That way I am keeping it nice and flat. My scissors are a little bit blunt and I might have to sharpen them. Just like that. And then of course I can cut off all the roots that hang down. So this is one going up, that can just come off. This one is crossing that one, but there's a nice side root there, so I can clip here at the side root and correct the crossing roots. Then remove here the side root so that it comes out. Here there's lots and lots of roots. Let's remove this middle one here. There's so much organics. I might have to wash this a little bit so you can better see what it looks like afterwards. So these sort of roots are completely unwanted, of course, because they look very, very bad later on. Now I'm going to have to judge where it comes from. I'm going to say it comes from the left. So that's why I'm going to clip it off, and I hope that I can just pull it out on the right. There we go. And this is really what to look out for if you work on a tree. Here again, one that grows across everything else. I'm just going to take this out so it doesn't get any thicker. And then of course these should not intersect too much. Try to get these all evened out right before you plant the tree up again. So all done with the root work. Look at that. That's a nice, very flat, thin root base, root ball, ready to go back into the pot. Roughly the front. Let this grow for another 2 years, and then probably it is ready to start developing the rest of the canopy.
Right, this cork bark elm is now ready to go back into the garden. Note that I am again covering the whole root base. I want the roots to develop and therefore I keep them below the soil. That way I get sort of, well, back budding. You get ramification on your roots closer to the trunk. The trunk itself will sprout more roots and therefore you always refine the nebari. It has lots of space in this pot. It will grow really well this year, and later in the season I'll probably have to prune it back. But that's part of the game, right? Now I still have this one. I said I was going to take cuttings. I have too many trees, but you know what? There's always people who want to have cuttings. Basically you just cut them off and you plant them in substrate, and that's all there is to it. This is a nice little angle. Might actually make 3 cuttings out of this.